Julianne Genter.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā koutou e te whare. Good morning. It gives me great pleasure to speak on behalf of the Green Party on the Taxation, Annual Rates, Foreign Superannuation and Remedial Matters Bill. The Green Party will be supporting this bill to Select Committee, and we'd like to congratulate the government for taking a very small but not insignificant step to improving the fairness of our tax system by removing some of the favourable tax treatments that have existed for the mining industry, which may well be worth $30 million. It's nice change to see the government actually moving towards fair tax treatment, particularly for an industry like mining, which we know is a favoured industry of this government. However, it doesn't completely level the playing field at all. The government is still picking winners. My colleague, Honourable David Parker, mentioned the recent report from the OECD, which was the 2013 Economic Survey. And what the OECD found was that the use of environmental taxes is very, very low in New Zealand by OECD standards. Their increased use would enhance the quality of future economic productivity growth. And they recommended a creation of a sovereign wealth fund, as Norway has, to manage any mining royalties much more equitably. The OECD has found that mining royalties and access charges are still extremely low in New Zealand, and as is the carbon price signal. So the Green Party in our taxation policy supports has a number of principles. Basically, we think that taxes should come from a broad base to avoid excessive reliance on income tax, and in particular, the tax base should include personal and business taxes that reward sustainable activities and enterprise. We'd like consumption and expenditure taxes that discourage wasteful use of energy and finite resources. Targeted environmental taxes designed to reduce and eliminate behaviours that simply are not sustainable in a finite world. And taxes that acknowledge the value of common property through resource rentals and which encourage long-term sustainable business practices. And of course, those principles are very much in line with what is recommended internationally by organizations like the OECD. We think that investment income from different sources should be treated equally for tax purposes. So I'd like to congratulate the Labour Party for their finally coming on board with the support of a capital gains tax. I think the Honourable David Parker gave an excellent explanation of why a capital gains tax is so important for rebalancing New Zealand's economy and for ensuring that we do have high-quality economic productivity rather than just speculative investment, which doesn't actually increase the wealth of New Zealand. Of course, the lack of a capital gains tax is just one of the factors in the housing affordability problems that are being faced in Auckland. There are other factors, such as an unknown quantity of foreign capital coming in because there's no restriction on the purchasing of property to New Zealand residents and citizens. And so we have foreign capital coming in, bidding up the price of houses, the lack of a capital gains tax, and we have quite easy or loose credit situation where it's quite easy to get credit. And that's leading to it being more favourable to purchase as opposed to rent. And what we've seen in Auckland is that it's much less a supply problem that's causing the housing unaffordability, but rather, and that's indicated by the gap that's opened up between house price inflation and rent inflation in Auckland. So the Green Party has as its priorities three basic areas. One is the economy. I think it's really important to look at rebalancing the economy and reduce our current account deficit. And there are many easy ways that we could be implementing policy that would do that. Unfortunately, the government is doing the opposite of most of these. For example, in their transport policy, they're spending a lot of money on a few projects that tend to aggravate our reliance on private vehicles rather than giving New Zealanders real choices. And that means that we have to, New Zealand households and businesses have to spend well over $12 billion a year on vehicles and fuel to run them, while the government spends $4 billion of our taxes on a few motorways that have extremely poor benefit-to-cost ratios that won't actually reduce transport costs for New Zealand households and business, but will it mean that New Zealand households still have to rely on their car for trips? And that means they have to go fill up the tank, and they're paying a lot of money for petrol. They would be paying even more if the New Zealand dollar came down to a level that would be more appropriate for it. And of course, all of that contributes to our current account deficit. The other priority for the Green Party is protecting our natural environment and our natural capital. The fact is that the planet is finite. We have finite resources. And if one accepts that we have finite resources, Mr. Speaker, it makes sense that we can't count on extracting resources forever and infinitely polluting the atmosphere in order to achieve a higher quality of life. It's simply not possible. On the one hand, we're being told that if we want to have a high quality of life, if we want wealth, that we have to dig up our precious minerals, we have to dig up our forests like the Denniston Plateau, we have to encroach upon these precious areas that are actually of very high value to New Zealanders in order to extract the minerals beneath them so that we can sell them. But that is not a sustainable strategy for long-term wealth creation, because once that place is gone, it is gone forever. And once we've sold the minerals, or the coal, as the case may be, what's our strategy after that? Once we've sold the coal, then what do we do to earn a living in the world? The sooner we recognize that there are sustainable industries that we could be cultivating, and we should focus our attention on those, then the less it's going to cost us, the easier it's going to be to achieve a higher standard of living for all New Zealanders. It's also important to reduce inequality. As David Parker mentioned earlier, New Zealand is one of the fastest growing rates of inequality in the OECD. And not only is that not fair, it's also not sustainable. It's not good for the economy. One of the factors in the global economic crisis was growing inequality. We're all in this together. And there's been a lot of research that shows that when the gap between those who have a lot and those who do not have, and those who have very little increases, then everybody is worse off. The entire country ends up paying more in terms of increased crime rates, having to put people in prison. We have worse health outcomes, and we end up paying more because of worse health outcomes. If we have an economy that looks after our people and our environment, that is going to be the best thing for all New Zealanders, and that is the priority of the Green Party. So we support a tax policy that can contribute to this overall quality of life of New Zealanders, and one of the most obvious ways to do that is through ecological taxes. We want to see a real price on carbon. The OECD has criticized us for not having a meaningful price on greenhouse gas emissions. We know we're going to have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We know we're going to have to transition to a low carbon economy. The sooner we do that, the less it will cost us. The sooner we face up and say, actually, we're going to have to develop new ways of doing business that don't rely on activities that pollute the atmosphere, the easier it's going to be for us to make that transition. The sooner that we put a tax on capital gains, the better it's going to be from an investment perspective. We're going to have people investing in productive industries, hopefully, in New Zealand. And at the very least, it should dampen the housing speculation, which is driving up prices in Auckland. And there are many other ways that we can have a more direct, fair and transparent tax system. We congratulate the government for their tiny move in that direction by removing favourable tax treatment to the mining industry in this bill, but we would very much ask and like to see a greater move towards ecological taxes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Maggie Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak to the first